Chapter 21 Crossed. David was waiting at Eric's locker when the final bell rang. Hallenbach seemed apprehensive. He bit his lip and looked from side to side, as if worried that someone might be watching. He was a boy who had grown used to being ambushed. "What's up?" Eric asked. "I've been thinking about what you said." "Yeah?" "And I have to show you something," Hallenbach said. "Okay, show me." "I can't. Not here," Hallenbach answered. There was anxiety in his voice. He seemed fidgety, nervous. "I need to bring you there." Eric frowned. He didn't have time for this. He had 2 dogs to walk when he got home, a mountain of math homework, plus an English paper to finish. "Can we make it fast?" Hallenbach chewed on his lips some more. He nodded sharply, not quite looking at Eric. Eric sighed, dialed in his locker combination, grabbed his backpack, and they headed out the main door. Hallenbach pointed toward the Final Rest Pet Cemetery. "In there," he said. "I don't want anybody else to see." Eric started to complain. "This is dumb. Why do you have to—" But he stopped himself when he saw the expression on Hallenbach's face. This was important to him. For the first time, battered and bullied David Hallenbach was showing trust in somebody. Of all the people in Bellport Central Middle School, Hallenbach reached out to Eric. Maybe that made sense, since Eric was still the new kid in town. Eric had tried to be nice to David lately. In some ways, he was just as much an outsider as David. As they walked, Eric wondered what it could be that Hallenbach wanted to show him. Something he found? A note? A photograph? And then the thought struck him. A weapon of some sort? A knife? A gun? Isn't that what happens when kids get picked on too much? Sometimes they can't take it anymore, and they break. No, that wasn't it. Not Hallenbach. But try as he might, Eric couldn't completely push the thought away. When it came down to it, Eric didn't know much about David Hallenbach, except that he was a perfect target, picked on every day and angry most of the time. They hopped a short fence and entered the grounds. "Where are we going exactly?" "It's back here. You'll see." Despite its proximity to the school, this was actually Eric's first time inside the cemetery grounds. It wasn't that creepy, the way a real cemetery, a human cemetery, could sometimes be. Eric couldn't get too worked up about a dead Siamese cat. Still, he marveled at the size of some of the headstones. There were a few that were really huge. Most of the gravestones were modest in height, about thigh-high, but they were thick and looked heavy. They were light brown or gray, with a few shiny black ones sprinkled in. Each had the pet's name engraved into it, complete with year of birth and death and the last name of the owner. Eric thought it was kind of comical. It was a cemetery, and that's serious stuff, but the names on the tombstones were like Sparky and Muggsy and Luther and Bubbles. A few had pictures of the dead, buried, rotting pet, and there were even little statues of dogs and cats at some of the grave sites. Eric noticed fresh flowers at a couple of sites, and that gave him a chill. The thought of some lady weeping at a gravesite over poor old Mr. Chuckles, the world's perkiest Yorkshire Terrier. He thought of Mrs. Rosen, the lunch aide whose dog died over the summer. When she had talked to Griffin that day, she seemed really heartbroken over it. Maybe her dog was buried in here somewhere. What was its name? Daisy? He remembered something his father said, back a few years ago when Eric was lobbying hard for a pet. Eric's dad replied, "Dogs are built-in heartbreak. 10 good years, 2 bad years, some giant vet bills, then they die and break your heart. It's not worth it, believe me." That was so his father, Mr. Half-Empty. "I wish I had a dog," Eric said. Hallenbach remained quiet, distant. He hadn't said a word since they'd entered the cemetery. Something on his mind, Eric surmised. When they neared the far corner, Hallenbach steered them to a low granite tombstone. Several small American flags, the type that kids wave at 4th of July parades, were planted in the ground at each side of the site. The tombstone read, "Checkers, 1951 to 62, Nixon." "Is this it? This is what you want to show me, where President Nixon's dog is buried?" Hallenbach appeared distracted, not listening. He was looking off in the other direction. A group of 5 boys emerged from the far side of the cemetery. Eric knew each one of them. They were led by Griffin, with Cody at his side. By the look of their faces, Eric could see they meant trouble. Hallenbach was going to get creamed. "You better get out of here," he said to David. "Maybe I can talk to them." But Hallenbach snorted, a sound of disgust. He took a few steps closer to the approaching boys. "Hey, guys," he said. "David," Eric warned, "don't." Hallenbach lifted his head and stared at Eric. The look on his face was pure, unabashed disgust. "You stupid idiot! You think he's after me, don't you?" It took a moment for it to register. Eric looked from Hallenbach to Griffin to Cody's hatchet face. A hollowed-out feeling entered Eric's chest, like a balloon expanding. An electric current tingled through his fingers. His legs felt leaden. "Oh, crap,"